Welcome to Historically Speaking. I am your host, Michael Dwyer, and today our program is going to be on the Salisbury Meeting House project. And with me here in the studio are two guests. Immediately to my left is Dr. Glenn Andrus, who was a professor of the history of art and architecture at Middlebury College from 1970 until 2015. And we have Laurie Minor-Cox, whom I worked with for many years in the Rutland Northeast Supervisory School District until her retirement as a guidance counselor at the Neshabie School. So welcome, friends. I'm delighted that we could have this conversation. So before turning over our program to the people who are really very cognizant of this subject, I felt that this would be a worthwhile show for us to consider because the problem is really endemic throughout all of the Northeast of when congregations shrink down and are no longer able to support the historic buildings that once housed the congregation for worship. And in Salisbury, they have a very unique plan in place that will preserve this lovely historical building beyond the life of the present congregation. And just to give us a feel for the really stunning work that has been done already to preserve the Salisbury Church, we're going to look at a brief video that shows us some of the work that has been done to preserve the Salisbury Church. And as we see the first image, many of you will say, wait a minute, that is not the Salisbury Congregational Church. We have several examples here of rural churches, and in just a moment you will see the Salisbury Meeting House. And here it is, the Salisbury Meeting House that looks like a quintessential Vermont village church, stereo photograph from at some point in the 19th century. And there's Laurie with her Kansas Seal apron. So I think these images provide for our audience who may or may not be familiar with this building. I think it's an excellent platform for our discussion. We have some images here of the state of the tower before its restoration. And it seems, I think, that, of course, with church steeples, towers, clock towers, whatever we want to call them, they're probably one of the most problematic aspects of the church to maintain. And even though the church tower in Pittsford was restored 15, 18 years ago, I look at that now and I thought, how are we going to erect the scaffolding to get way up there? So I think at this point, having seen some of these images, I would like to turn over our program to you, Glenn, so you can tell us a little bit more background and to kind of lay the challenge that you are hoping that this project will fulfill.
Okay, thank you. we love this church. It's the centerpiece of our village, and it's also a landmark in the Outer Valley. Really, you can see it across the valley. In the wintertime, we floodlight it, and people see it from Highway 7, and it's a beacon. When I moved to Salisbury 52 years ago, it was a thriving country church. But it's gone through the vicissitudes that so many of our small churches in Vermont have, where we have an aging congregation, and where people who want to be churched today go to bigger, much more active churches with full programs that are relatively nearby. And as Laurie and I were thinking as we came here today, we're the last of the young generation in our church. And we have a situation where we have a building that has been well maintained. We were very fortunate in being able to raise the funds recently, 8 years ago now, to restore the ailing tower, which won a preservation award from the state, and was a pretty dramatic process. But we've been able to stave off maintenance issues. There are no major issues with the building. It's in good shape. We also have, over the years, had a very active program beyond just the church. For 48 years now, Laurie?
Something like that, yeah.
A lot of our photos were of the annual ice cream social that started 48 years ago. It's on the 4th of July, and it's become, in essence, the 4th of July celebration for the town of Salisbury. We scoop ice cream for upwards of 300 people in a couple hours in the afternoon. It's a fundraiser for charitable activities, largely for the food shelf. And it's a gala time that the community comes together. They love sitting on the church lawn and talking over their ice cream, and they linger. We have had community potlucks there. For 43 years, we have had a summer concert series, 6 free Friday evenings concerts by mostly regional artists. In the sanctuary, that we're very fortunate that the sanctuary has ideal acoustics for music. In fact, it's been used even for recording sessions. Yeah. And particularly for chamber music. It's as if you have that chamber ensemble sitting in your living room. It's a real gift to us, and it's a gift to them. We have a wonderful relationship with Point Counterpoint Music Camp that uses it heavily in the summer. In fact, it relies on it for their faculty concerts and also for their student recitals. And building around that, we've had this concert series that now has evolved into the Otter Creek Music Festival. So we hope it will continue. But we have this situation where we are the venue for local funerals. We are a meeting place for the community, the Historical Society, the Conservation Commission, and even some town informational meetings are held there. We're serving the community, but we're down to fewer than 20 members in our congregation. And that's fallen very heavily on the shoulders of those 20 people to maintain this beautiful facility. It's historic, it's on the National Register. It's likely, very likely, that it was built from designs by Ami B. Young, who did the Vermont State House. It's a building that is worthy of preservation, and it also fills a very important role in our community and in our region. And yet, for these few people to be maintaining it, struggling to maintain it, it's become a burden. And so what we're trying to do is set up what we're rebranding at the Salisbury Meeting House. In following a historical model, the first meeting house in Salisbury built in 1803, was built by an association of residents for use by several congregations and as a place for town meetings. But it wasn't owned by the town, it was owned by this association. And that dissolved in the 1830s when the Methodists moved to the west side and built their own church, and the Congregationalists moved to the east side in the thriving village and built their church. But we're looking on that as a model to go back to a meeting house association, a nonprofit that will own the building and will manage it. We are fortunate that we have some endowment that we can pass on to the association so that it can cover maintenance on the building. So they won't have to go out and do fundraising right away, which is, of course, the thing everybody worries about with such things. And we're hoping to be able to pass the building on with endowment, have it managed and maintained by the association, and there are a number of potential partners to come into this association, and have the congregation, as long as it lasts, as one of the partners in the association.
What I have appreciated about hearing about this project is that you're being proactive. And I think that in so many instances, churches reach the point of crisis and there isn't really a way forward. And as we have discussed, sometimes church buildings are left to historical societies. They're only open a couple of days a week, or the building is completely repurposed. And I think what I admire about your plan is the integration of various things that still includes the opportunity for a worshiping presence on Sunday, but not exclusively for that.
Well, a few years ago, and we knew, of course, kind of our direction at that point. A few years ago, in the local newspaper, I had read about, and I believe it was the church in Cornwall that was all of a sudden finding themselves looking like they were going to close. And, you know, at that moment then trying to figure out what they were going to do with their building and all. And I got this idea that we could somehow give our building to a nonprofit organization that could then deal with the building. And there wasn't really something ready to receive it. So we, you know, it seemed like that might work, but we have been subsequently setting up our own nonprofit organization that could take this on, and be the owner and the manager of the building, and yet still allow for church services as long as people want to have them.
There were really two other options that you know, one could have seen. One is trying to turn the building over to the town. And that's, in essence, what the Cornwall Church tried to do, and the town said, no way. We're not taking this white elephant on. And we don't want it to fall on the backs of the taxpayers of Salisbury. The other thing is that, several years ago, there was some interest on the part of potential owners of the music camp, saying, well, we'd like to buy the camp, but we need to have the church as well because we need it. And that would have privatized it. And we want to keep it as a community resource. Actually, there have been relatively few. It's a wonderful wedding venue, except there have been very few weddings taking place in it. And it's, you know, it's a quintessential country church. It's beautiful. But I think one of the problems there is that many people getting married now want to bring in their own clergy or their own officiant. And when you're doing that into an established church, the pattern is usually that you rely on the pastor of that church. And so it's been underused that way, though we've had, we don't have that problem with funerals. We have huge funerals in the church. The people in the town all count on that.
Right, right.
But we want to keep it as an open, multi-use community resource. And we approached the Preservation Trust of Vermont, and we also approached a group called Partners for Sacred Places. They're a national organization based in Philadelphia, and said, do you have models for what we're trying to do? And they said, no, we don't have any exact models for this. You develop it, and then let us see how it works. So that's where we are.
I think you'll be successful with your expertise, with your zeal, for your love of the community in this building. And the thing that I think will make all of this work is the scale of the building, because it is so well integrated into the village. And what I have seen since my childhood, I grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts, 27 Catholic churches, huge edifices. My childhood church covered a city block, seating for 800 in the upper church with the overflow in the lower church. It once covered the largest geographical area in the city, tens of thousands of families. It closed 15 years ago. They couldn't afford to heat it, so it is a rotting building in the heart of Fall River that what are you going to do with something that large? There's a point when buildings aren't properly maintained, you will never get back if you condominiumize it. But I think with this building, as you say, with so many of the maintenance issues already been addressed, I think it's a very doable project. But there are probably some minor things that you will have to do, like with handicap access. The basement is a little bit of a challenge with the stairway. So is that part of the plan moving into it, that you might need more bathroom facilities, et cetera?
Well, we've thought about adding another bathroom, and whether that happens at this point, I think that maybe that would be something for the nonprofit to take on, because truly, although we've been kind of working on this for a while, we began rather slowly. So,
well, we had COVID.
Well, there was COVID in there too. So at this point, we're really looking to try to wrap that all up during this 2024 year.
Oh.
That's my personal hope. I think Glenn's also. So if we can do that, some of those things, and certainly there are grants available to help with some of those kinds of projects, particularly because one of the big uses for the space is essentially an arts music type venue. So you can sometimes get grants for things that are related to that. I mean, the church has in the past, in fact, for the platform that we have that builds out to make more of a stage for summer musical happenings. And, so I think that some of those things could happen. We're not looking to make everything that could be done before this transfer occurs. I mean, because heck, with any building, I mean, your own house, there's never a point when there isn't some project that you could be taking on. And like Glenn said, we are planning on moving a fair amount of the church's investments to this, not to be spent willy-nilly on all these kinds of projects, but so they do have something. So if you got a grant to add a second bathroom, for instance, and it had a matching part to it, you could indeed utilize some of that funds. And some of those, of course, produce income too, depending on the economy.
So as this moves forward, will this be the most unique church reconfiguration project that you are aware of in the state?
I think, I mean, there are plenty, active, the thing is, in many cases, when churches go this direction, they're still maintained by their home congregation. And the difference here is that the home congregation is giving up the building, and another body is to take over. For instance, Partners for Sacred Places have any number of situations where churches establish daycare centers in them, and they, have other kinds of programs for the community and all, or even for the arts. But it's always sponsored by, organized by the home congregation. And this is a case where we've been doing that for 4 decades, and we're tired, and we need to hand it off. But you mentioned, for instance, handicapped access. Looking at the front of the church, the stairs certainly aren't handicapped accessible. However, we have a handicapped accessible entrance, and in fact, it's one of only 2 public meeting spaces in Salisbury that is handicapped accessible. And while the stairs to the lower level are a bit difficult within the church, there is an outside door with a ramped entrance that goes right down into the lower level. And we have been doing things to adapt it so that outside users can use it more easily. We had a monster of a Garland gas stove in the kitchen that the pilots would never stay lighted, and it always smelled of gas. And
Things like that scare me. You walk
it
into
was frightening, and you had to have someone who really knew how to use it.
Right.
And instead, we've replaced that now with a new range, with an induction top and a convection oven, new refrigerator, so that, for instance, when a group like Barn Opera comes in to do their annual performance of Amal and the Night Visitors, they feed their crew there, and they can utilize that kitchen without someone from the church hovering over them saying, now this is how you light the pilot light and everything else. So we've made an attempt to make the building more generally usable, more easily usable. The platform, the extension stage, sets up in 20 minutes time. And so there are things like that we've tried to do.
Yeah, we also have separate heating now in the lower level that isn't dependent on the running the whole furnace for everything, and it allows, if a group just wanted to use the lower level in the wintertime, for instance, you can easily just heat that space and not have the whole building.
One of the things that I love most about the interior are the box pews, which are certainly a rarity that they have survived as well as they have. And I think that's an instance that you're honoring the tradition of the early days in the church when people paid for their pew, when you literally, would close the door to keep the heat in, etc. But I think that's part of the charm of the building, that with its simplicity, it still has that air of Calvinistic austerity within it. And I think the other thing that I feel very confident you will be successful in all of this, because you also have the spirit of Vermont independence in this, because when you get into denominational ownership, it gets very complicated. So as an example that's been very much in the news, the closure of St. Stephen's Church in Winooski. And what do you do with this building? And it was a very feisty public meeting when the Diocese of Burlington favored the destruction of the church because it did not want it repurposed as something else. And people said, no, we don't want this beautiful edifice destroyed. So I think that you have many things going for you with this project. And as we wind down, I'd like to give each of you the last word to wrap up our discussion today.
Well, we're hopeful. The big challenge is that right now, and we've been publicizing this for a while, and people say, oh, this is a wonderful idea. We really like this. We need people to come forward and say, I'd like to be on the board. And we have to assemble a board an active board of this nonprofit. Right now we have 3 officers. I mean, we are registered with the state and with the feds as a nonprofit, but we have to get people actually to sign on now and say, yes, we want to be involved. We want to keep this as a community resource. So this is important to us, and we need them to come forward.
And that would not be church I mean, they can be church people, but right now, the 3 of us that are the board are all connected with the church. So, we're really looking to have people from the broader community who also then represent broader interests, or, have, whether they're interested in it from the community point of view of it as a community center, or interested in it from the arts point of view, or whatever, that they would want to come and be involved.
We want to bring in users too. The Lake Dunmore Association uses it for their annual meetings. Point Counterpoint Music Camp uses it. We are collaborating now more and more with the town. We're developing our parking area, in fact, to accommodate a town-run daycare center, which is nearby but doesn't have proper parking. And so we want a partnership there with the town. And if we can bring in these partners, we think we can make it work.
I certainly hope so. And one of the things about this platform reaching a video audience, you never know who might be watching this on public access television who say, I want to become involved. And the other thing that has happened to this program, thanks to the auspices of one of my former students who works for another public television station, this is also disseminated in Addison County. So I think this is a good platform to give this a wider audience. And I think as you have articulated the scope and the necessity of this project and your love of wanting it to continue into the future, I think as other people struggle with the same need on epic scales, that, what do we do with the Baptist Church? What do we do with the Methodist Church in Rutland? What do we do with Immaculate Heart? I think that we all need to, in a new paradigm, look at more creative and broader ways that church structures can be used. So thank you very much for being my guest today.